We've talked a little bit about gender this semester in the context of the Hebrew scriptures and the New Testament and the Quran, and that's a theme that we're going to revisit throughout the course of Western Civ 1. It's especially important when we discuss Antigone because she is a woman. She's one of the few women that we read about who's like a prominent character. So it's really important to know a few things about women in ancient Greece, so we can sort of compare and contrast differences between women in ancient Greece with women in the other societies we're going to look at. So one thing to understand about the ancient Greeks is that they have slaves, right? And women are subjugated in society, so they do not enjoy any positions of power. Especially in Athens, women are confined within the home, and so even inside the home, you would have parts of the house that the men were allowed to be in that the women just weren't allowed to go into. So a man in Athens could only be married to one woman, but he could have concubines, and they could also live in the house with his wife. Women were valued in the sense that they could have children, but they were not valued beyond this. They couldn't own any property except their own clothes and jewelry, and they could own their own slaves, which is, I guess, whatever. And they're kept in separate quarters of the house. So if she wanted to leave the house, an Athenian woman had to be accompanied by a guardian at all times. Also, Athenian women were not formally educated, and they couldn't participate in public life. One thing to understand is that this is not the case throughout all of the Greek city-states. I would say Sparta is probably the exception, but if you take the city-state of Sparta, women there are educated, and they are permitted to participate in sports in order to build up their bodies, because the Spartans they value physical prowess and, you know, being able to compete in war and stuff like that. And so not only were women supposed to have children, but they were supposed to breed these strong warrior sons. So they did enjoy a little bit more privilege in Spartan society, but they still couldn't vote. So those are some important things to understand. I'll tell you a little bit about where Greek drama comes from, because again, Antigone is what we're reading, and it is a play. So the word theater comes from the Greek word theatron, which just actually means seeing place. And the word drama comes from the word drawn, which just means to do. And the theater of the ancient Greeks actually evolves from religious ceremonies, which date back to the time of the Mycenaeans, right, 1200 BCE. And actually, the origin of these ceremonies was a cult of people who worshipped the Greek god Dionysus. So remember, we have a polytheistic society. You had these little religious cults that developed around different gods. Dionysus, I like to call him the party god because he's the god of fertility, wine, agriculture, and sexuality. So the cult of Dionysus, they were involved in some pretty scandalous activities. They would do these ritual celebrations that may have included getting really drunk, orgies, human and animal sacrifices. Things got a little crazy back then. But so you're wondering, like, where did the theater come from? Well, originally during these festivals, you would have a solo speaker who would get up there and perform oral storytelling of traditional Greek tales. And as that art form progressed, more speakers were added, and then people began to act out the action. So the first playwright to add actors was Thebes, right? And that's why we call actors thespians now. So it started out as storytelling, and then people began to act out the stories, and we began to add characters and have more and then there were actors. And so these celebrations actually caught on through the rest of Greece. It evolved to the point where there were competitions for who could write the best play. And the author of Antigone, Sophocles, was the winner of a bunch of these contests. So you had basically two kinds of plays. You had tragedies and comedies. Tragedies are the ones that are based on myths that the audience would have known going into these. So There's no happy endings. You'll see with Antigone, it's, a total downer. But the important thing about the tragedies is that people would have been really familiar with these stories already. Comedies are often like parodies of current events. They have happy endings. Lysistrata is a really great example of a comedy. Another thing about Greek drama is the chorus. They're an important part of this. So it's a group of people who are supposed to act as like the commentators. So when you watch a football game on TV, you've got someone who does the play, or if you're listening to the Chiefs on the radio, you have Mitch Holthus who does the play-by-play announcing. He's telling you what's happening in the game, and then you have Len Dawson who is giving the color commentary. You can think of the chorus as the color commentary of the action of the play. They often give these moralizing opinions. They change their mind. They're wishy-washy, right? The chorus will start the play on one person's side, and then they'll shift to somebody else's side. And they're actually meant to represent like the opinions of the audience and stuff. So the chorus is important here. I have this posted on Blackboard too, but this is just a family tree of the line of Thebes. And so you can see, if you look at the top, you can see it goes back to the gods, Ares and Aphrodite, but we're going to be focused on the bottom here. So Antigone, Ismene, Polynices, and Eteocles here are down at the bottom, the sons of Oedipus and Jocasta, and they're the cousins of Haman and this guy who we never hear about, who is the son of Creon and Eurydice. So this is just sort of, so you can, it's hard to, keep all these weird Greek names straight. So I'll tell you a little bit of background about the Oedipus cycle before, and then you'll know what the story of Antigone is about. So basically, we start with Laius, who's the king of Thebes, right here. Go back to this. He is warned by an Apollon oracle that his son is going to kill him and marry his wife. So when his son is born, they're like, well, we can't let this happen because, fate is really important to the Greeks, and anything that's fated to happen is going to happen. So he and his wife Jocasta take the baby and give him to a shepherd and tell the shepherd to bind his ankles and expose him on a mountain and leave him to die. So they basically got someone to carry out their dirty work for them, but the shepherd isn't unable to kill the baby, and he hands the baby off to another shepherd, and he's eventually passed on to the king and queen of Corinth, and they adopt the baby and name him Oedipus, and Oedipus means swell foot, right, because his feet were bound. So Oedipus grows up, the adoptive son of the king and queen of Corinth, but he grows really suspicious of his origins when he gets older. So he visits the oracle of Delphi, and the oracle tells him the prophecy that his father was told years ago. And the problem is he doesn't know that the king and queen of Corinth aren't his actual parents. So what he does is he leaves. He's like, oh, I don't want to kill my parents, so let me leave Corinth, because he thinks his mother and father, the king and queen of Corinth, are his actual parents. So when he's fleeing town, he runs into an old man on the side of the road, and they have this altercation, and he ends up killing him. Guess who that guy was? It was his real father, King Laius. So in his attempts to flee, he's traveling, and he gets near the city of Thebes. Thebes has been in trouble for a little while because they've had this really pesky Sphinx who wouldn't let anybody into town unless they could solve this riddle. And Oedipus, being just a total smarty pants, is able to solve it, and he defeats the Sphinx. The riddle is something like, I'm not going to tell you the riddle because I don't remember it, but it's just some silly riddle. So Oedipus defeats the Sphinx, and he's welcomed into Thebes, and the people of Thebes are so grateful for him that they ask him to be the new king and marry the queen, Jocasta, who remember, is the real mother of Oedipus, because, hey, their king has disappeared and he's been gone for a long time. So Oedipus agrees. He marries Queen Jocasta, who is actually his mother, and they have 4 kids together. Two sons and 2 daughters. Eteocles and Polynices are the sons, and Antigone and Ismene are the daughters. And many years later, a plague visits Thebes, and this is when Oedipus actually learns the truth of the story. And so what happens after this is basically a bunch of shit goes down. Jocasta hangs herself. Oedipus gouges his eyes out with the pins from her robe. So he basically just wanders around for the rest of his life blind, led by his daughter Antigone. He leaves Thebes in shame. He exiles himself, and so after this, there's no king of Thebes. There isn't a ruler. So remember that there are 2 sons from Oedipus and Jocasta's incestuous marriage, and they agree to swap. Like, Eteocles says, I'll rule for a year, and then Polynices, you can rule. And so Eteocles gets the throne, and his year is up, and guess what? He doesn't want to give up the throne, so his brother Polynices goes into exile, and he marries the daughter of the king of Argos, and decides to try to take back the throne. So he gathers up an army and attacks the city of Thebes and his brother Eteocles. And the prophecy is that whoever Oedipus supports will win, and Oedipus is like, I'm not going to support either one of you. The only Theban property you will ever own is a burial plot, and then he dies. And then there's this really great play by Aeschylus called 7 Against Thebes, which is the actual story of the standoff where the 2 brothers kill each other. And this is where we are introduced at the beginning of Antigone. So there's no male ruler left, and Creon, Antigone's uncle, has been crowned the new king of Thebes. Eteocles has been buried, but Creon has issued an edict that Polynices will not be allowed to have a proper burial because he is a traitor. So this is the catalyst for all of the action that follows in Antigone. And so I will stop this one here because it's already running a little long. And that should give you sufficient background to understand all of the story of Antigone, behind the story of Antigone, so you can sort of put yourself right in the action.